Coming into number 10, we have the legend of the black-eyed children. Forget the black-eyed peas, meet the black-eyed children. I've said it before, I'll say it again, children ghosts creep me out. They're the worst kinds of ghosts. Kids are creepy, end of really, but kid ghosts, Apparently there are some kind of creepy black-eyed children stalking the streets of Abilene in Texas. The story comes from a local journalist, Brian Bethel, who said that in 1996 he was in the parking lot of a movie theater when he popped on his inner car light to write a check. 96 and checks. See, this wouldn't happen now. 2 words. E-transfer. Wait, is that 1 word? Either way, I absolutely knew that archaic banking was a road to evil. Back to the story. Noticing the light in his car, 2 kids came up to his window, which he rolled down to see what they wanted. Now the kids looked between 9 and 12 years old, and they asked him for a ride. He said they had a very uneasy feeling about them, and after a while he noticed that their eyes were totally black. He wound up his window and got the heck out of there, but his story was enough to go down in Abilene legend.
Number 9. The Moody Mansion, Galveston. Before I get to the next entry, make sure to like and subscribe if you're enjoying the video so that I can keep bringing you the most amazing content. Before it was known as the Moody Mansion, it was the Willis Mansion. Built for Narcissa Willis in 1895, this 31-room mansion boasts a Romanesque architecture with ornate features like stained glass windows and hand-carved woodwork. She commissioned the house to be built against her late husband's wishes after he'd passed, spending the family inheritance in the process, something her 10 children did not appreciate. Unfortunately, she didn't get to live there long since she passed away in 1899, and it was then purchased by the Moody's. In 1900, a hurricane destroyed much of Galveston and took the lives of some 6,000 people, but strangely, the mansion stayed standing, untouched. Perhaps it was the ghost of Narcissa keeping her prized possession safe? Visitors to the house constantly report faces and spectral images showing up in photographs taken in the house, prompting paranormal investigators to come here to do research.
From Candy Lady to Donkey Lady at number 8. Donkey Lady, now I've heard it all. Apparently ye old Donkey Lady haunts a bridge over Elm Creek in San Antonio, Texas. The origin story of the ghost dates back almost 200 years to the mid-1800s. When settlers were living on the banks of Elm Creek, a husband and wife had a small wooden farmhouse and were making a living with a small number of livestock. One day, one of their donkeys or mules was grazing in the area when a young man from the town came across it. This man was not a nice man, but he was a wealthy man. He was the son of an important town leader. The young man teased the donkey and hit it with a stick, to which the donkey fairly responded by biting him. I'd bite someone if they hit me with a stick too. Retaliating, the man started heavily beating the donkey. Hearing their mule being attacked, the couple emerged and told the man to get away, throwing rocks at him for hurting their valuable animal. The man had a bit of Prince Joffrey entitlement moment, and he screamed that his father would hear about this, and to be honest, hear about it he did. He brought a bunch of friends to the farmhouse to torch the place. When the husband intervened, he was shot, as were his sons. The wife's dress caught fire and she helplessly watched her loved ones die. As she was engulfed in flames, she screamed, running down the road. She began to burn as she threw herself into the creek. Her body was never found, but her wails are said to still be heard along the stretch of the road. If a car stops for too long, it is said that she appears screaming with her arms outstretched on the bridge. Some even report a body falling on the bonnet of the car, but when they stop, there's nothing there. Coming into number 7, we have Arlington's Screaming Bridge / Hell's Gate. According to many Texans, going down the Arlington Screaming Bridge and listening out for the shrieks of the dead is some kind of local rite of passage. On a winter's night in 1961, a car full of 6 Arlington teenage girls fell off a burned out wooden bridge and onto the rail tracks next to a creek. This creek had a little bridge over it that's still there today. Now the driver didn't realize that the bridge was out, drove over it, crashed. 3 of the girls died as a result of the impact, 1 suffered a brain injury and 2 others were injured. Those responsible for burning the bridge were 4 boys who went to the same high school as the girls, resulting in a big local scandal and tragedy. The bridge over the creek still stands and people refer to it as the Screaming Bridge in memory of the girls who died. The spot near the bridge may also be cursed. In 1994, 2 people were killed in a truck when the driver tried to outrace a train at the crossing. Curse or just idiocy? I don't know. Coming into number 6, we have the White Lady of Rio Frio. So the Frio River River is a beautiful spot near Rio Frio in Texas. On a summer's day, you may see picnickers hanging out by the water enjoying the weather, but some say they've had a far spookier experience. Many people that visit the Frio River have reported a strange white mist hovering over the water. Some say it's a strange microclimate, but others cite the story of the Lady of Frio. The story goes that back in the 1900s, a young girl called Maria Juarez was the prettiest girl in the canyon. She was young and had an elder sister whom she loved deeply. Her sister had children with a man called Gregorio, who unfortunately cared more about Maria than a sister-in-law. Maria helped raise her sister's children and dreamed that someday she would meet someone, marry them, and have kids of her very own. She thought all of her dreams had come true when she met Anselmo, a dashing young man who seemed to return her affections. Sadly, this angered Gregorio, who told Maria that he loved her and wanted to be with her. When she rebuffed him because of her sister and Anselmo, he shot her through the heart by the lake. Now, her spirit is said to haunt the spot to this day. Adding a level of legitimacy to the story, there is an unmarked grave in a Frio cemetery said to belong to Maria, the White Lady, who died an unmarried virgin. Coming into number 5, we have El Muerto. The El Muerto tale is truly terrifying. Back during the gold rush era, people thought that there was gold to be found in Texas. On top of that, the USA-Mexico border was hotly contested around this area, with an area of no man's land between the two countries. In this area, bandits were rife and Texas Rangers were around to keep them in check. One ranger, William Bigfoot Wallace, wanted to teach the bandits a lesson after one persistent criminal, known simply as Vidal, stole a bunch of Mustang horses. When he was in court, Bigfoot Wallace and his ranger friends chopped off Vidal's head, sat his body on a horse, attached his hands to the reins, and strung his head to the saddle. This was supposed to teach other would-be bandits a lesson not to mess with the Texas Rangers. Some poor sod then had to deal with finding the horse and its deceased cargo, which would be absolutely awful. Despite eventually being taken down from the horse, legend has it that Vidal rides on through the Rio Grande area today, and his ghost is dubbed as El Muerto. Coming into number 4, we have the Dancing Devil of El Cameroncito. A dancing Texas urban legend. I am so down for this. Apparently the Dancing Devil is local only to El Cameroncito, so ladies of other towns, no worries if a man is asking you to dance, you're probably safe. Ladies in Cameroncito though, watch out. So basically a legend has it that in the 1970s, a man in a dapper suit would ask beautiful ladies to dance with him. While they didn't find him beautiful, they felt compelled to dance. As he danced, women would be swept up. One day, a woman noticed the man she was dancing with had hooves for feet and that everyone near them was staring in horror. Realizing she was dancing with the devil, she ran away. The devil, however, remained. Now, I always keep my demons in my dancing shoes. Coming into number 3, we have Goatman. Goatman, 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 Goatman. Fun to say, fun to talk about. There are a couple of legends surrounding the Goatman of Old Alton Bridge in Denton County. The bridge is locally dubbed Goatman's Bridge, and some say that is because there is a goat-like demon that haunts the nearby forest. But others turn to a more elaborate tale of a local goat farmer. Oscar Washburn was a black goat farmer who was known for being an honest businessman, and he was a well-liked member of the community. Unfortunately, a successful black man caught the attention of the KKK, who was said to have abducted him in August 1938. Reportedly, they tied a noose around his neck and threw him over the Old Alton Bridge into the river below. When they went to bring up his body, they found that the noose was empty. Frustrated, the clan went to his house and slaughtered his wife and children. Washburn's body was never found, but a lot of paranormal enthusiasts will tell you that if you drive out over the bridge at night without your headlights on, the old goat man will be standing on the other side to greet you. Some also report being touched or grabbed by a spirit, and others say there are weird flashing lights in the nearby forest. Coming into number 2, we have the ghost of Fort Phantom Hill. Fort Phantom is one of the most well-preserved historic sites in Texas, with original architecture dating back to the mid-1850s. Fort Phantom was built as a safe stop for immigrants headed to the Californian gold fields. The story behind the name of Phantom Hill seems to be twofold. On the one hand, the fort is said to look really high up on a plateau from afar, but when you get close, it looks level, so it disappears like a phantom. The other story is that one night while a sentry was keeping watch, he fired on a Native American who was on the hill. When he went to go and investigate, he didn't find a body. When the team at the whole fort went out to look for a band of natives, they couldn't find any evidence of them ever being nearby. This ghost on the hill is said to re-emerge every now and then, confusing those who watch from the garrison. Finally, coming into number 1, we have one of the most well-known Texas urban legends ever. We have the Houston Batman. So first, I was like, Batman? Hell yes, get me there. But then I delved further into this legend and I realized that they don't mean like the superhero. No. The Houston Batman is also known as the Houston Horror and is a winged creature that has regularly been sighted in Houston, Texas. Now this creature is a bit like the Mothman of the Mothman prophecies, and I don't like a big moth. The story of the winged menace dates back to 1953 when a woman and her neighbors were sitting on their porch in East 3rd Street, Houston. 23-year-old housewife Hilda Walker said she looked up over the lawn and saw the shadow of a huge moth. When she looked up, she saw something huge then fly into a pecan tree. Her and her neighbors thought that the monster was around 6.5 feet tall, although they weren't totally sure what they'd seen. 14-year-old Judy Mayer, who was also sat on the porch, screamed in fear as she got a square-on look at the monster. He was described as a man, but with wings, huge wings, and a weird, strange yellow haze around him. Mrs. Walker reported the incident to the police and spoke to local news outlets. The Batman/Mothman may have been spotted once again by Houston Bel Air theatre workers in the 1990s, and the legend lives on today. Some suspect a government cover-up is at play, as vigilantes seeking the Batman discovered that some years after the initial incident, Mrs. Walker's neighborhood was raised to make way for a new part of the interstate.
This American serial killer is sometimes known as the Alligator Man, and it's going to become obvious why very soon. After fighting in Europe during World War I, he opened a saloon called the Sociable Inn in Elmendorf, Texas. At first everything seemed normal, people coming in for some bevies and some banter, and it was all a great time. However, it can't always be just bevies and banter. Local heads turned when he built a pond and bought 5 alligators to live in it. He would charge visitors if they wanted to see them, especially during feeding time. The meals were mostly live cats and dogs, so poor puppies. Then women in the area reported missing. Some of them were barmaids at the inn, then former girlfriends of Joe Ball, and then finally his wife. Joe Ball had been killing them, butchering their remains, and then feeding them to his alligators. Now, I'm not sure how people settled relationship quarrels back then, but I feel like there are a lot better ways than just feeding the missus to the pet alligators, but that's just me though. Starting in 1936, he did this for 2 years. He was taken in for police questioning but didn't crack. He believed he was safe because there was no way for police to even find the bodies. However, he did have an accomplice who did talk. The man told the police how Ball had forced him to move female body parts at gunpoint. The police showed up at the inn and then asked to inspect the meat barrel. Joe Ball hit the no sale button on the cash register. He then reached inside and grabbed his pistols from the drawer and shot himself in the heart, and thus ends the story of the Alligator Man.
Coming in at number 9, we have the Chupacabra. The legend of the Chupacabra. This one isn't restricted to Texas alone. The Chupacabra story first sprang up in Puerto Rico. It is said to be a blood-sucking monster from the deep that attacks animals and drinks the blood of livestock, especially goats, which is why the creature's name translates to goat sucker in Spanish. Anyway, in Texas, reports of the Chupacabra were rife in the year 2007 when a woman named Phyllis Canyon reported seeing one of the blood-sucking monsters at her ranch in South Texas. She also reportedly found a number of chickens with their throats torn open. This sparked a whole Chupacabra panic, and the legend of the beast was firmly consolidated in the Lone Star State lore.
Next up at number 8, we have the Candyman. No, it's not as sweet as it sounds. That's the gruesome nickname given to Dean Core, a pedophile killer responsible for the murder of at least 28 people in Texas. Some even believe that number could be as high as 47. 28, 47, I mean that's a bloody big range. He would often take his victims' car and house keys as a trophy. His sole targets were males between the ages of 13 and 20, and he would lure them in with the help of 2 teenage accomplices. Victims would then be tortured, beaten, and raped, sometimes for days, before Core eventually strangled or shot them. Core got his nickname the Candyman due to his family owning a candy making business, which he was fired from for making sexual advances on employees. Objection, why did his parents do nothing when they saw this go on the first time round? I mean, they could have saved the world from a whole lot of grief. In a cruel twist to the murders, Core would often make the teenagers teenagers write letters to their parents explaining their absence, leaving police to assume that they had just simply run away.
Moving on to number 7 now, we have Carl Eugene Watts. When Watts was 12 years old, he began to fantasize about torturing and killing girls and young women. During adolescence, he began to stalk girls, and it's thought he killed his first victim before the age of 15. In 1969, he was arrested for sexually assaulting 26-year-old Joan Gave. He was sentenced to a mental hospital in Detroit. In 1974, he killed his first official victim, torturing and brutally murdering 20-year-old Gloria Steele. From there on, he would go on to kill a further 22 confirmed people, mostly women, and would claim that he also killed up to 40 or perhaps even 80 people during this crazy killing spree. He was sentenced to life in prison, where he died in 2007 at the age of 53. Next up at number 6 now, we have George Hennard, also known as the Lubis Massacre. This mass shooting took place on October 16, 1991 in Lubis Cafeteria in Killeen, Texas. On that day, Hennard drove a pickup truck through the front window of the cafe, and he screamed about local women being vipers and said this is what they've done to him and his family, and that this day was payback day. He then opened fire on everyone inside the building and continued to hunt people down as they fled. He killed 23 people. 10 of them with single shots to the head, and wounded another 37. After a tense standoff with police, he committed suicide with a shot to the head. The event now stands as the 4th deadliest non-school mass shooting in US history. Moving on to number 5 now, we have the Eyeball Killer. In the 1990s, Texas was terrorized by a serial killer with a grisly signature move, eye removal. Their first victim was Mary Pratt, killed on December 13, 1990. When the body was autopsied, the coroner found that her eyes had been carefully removed from their sockets. This grisly detail was actually kept hidden from the media, and the case soon went cold. On February 10, 1991, Susan Peterson was found dead. Her eyes had also been removed. Police increased patrols in the area of Dallas where the murders were taking place, but still the Eyeball Killer claimed another victim, Shirley Williams, found on March 18th. Her eyes were also missing, but she also had facial bruises and a broken nose, consistent with being punched in the face. A woman tipped off the police about a man called Charles Albright. She said he was known to have an obsession with knives and eyes. Strange combination. Police found that he had a history of assaulting prostitutes. They acquired a search warrant for his home and found a number of suspicious items that possibly linked him to the murders. He was charged with the Eyeball Killer murders and a further unresolved murder of Rhonda Bowie. The prosecution's case fell apart though, and he was sentenced to life for only one of the murders. Although heavily suspected to be the actual Eyeball Killer, the murders remain officially unsolved.
Next up at number 4, we have David Koresh. He was the leader of a Christian religious group in Elk, Texas called the Branch Davidians. The group had been known to officials for over a decade, and they did have run-ins with the law before, but everything came to a head in 1993. On February 28th, America's Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco and Firearms attempted to execute a search warrant on the Branch Davidians compound. They were investigating sexual abuse charges and illegal weapons violations. Now, I'm no expert, but I'm 100% sure that neither of those fall under the category of divine. The group responded to this with guns. A fierce gun battle erupted, resulting in the deaths of 4 government agents and 6 Branch Davidians. The FBI then took over and sieged the building for 51 days. During the final assault by the FBI, a fire broke out and spread quickly through the compound. 9 made it out alive, but a further 76 were killed, including their leader David Koresh, and good riddance to him.
Alright then, moving on to number 3 now, we have Devin Patrick Kelly. On November 5th, 2017, Kelly opened fire in a small church in the rural community of Sutherland Springs, Texas. 26 people were killed, including an unborn baby. It became the deadliest mass shooting in the history of Texas. 20 others were injured. Kelly was later found dead in his car from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head after an intense police chase. Investigators determined that Kelly was in a domestic dispute with his mother-in-law and would often send her threatening texts. Now, she often attended that church, and it seems that Kelly went there to kill her. However, she was not there that day when he unloaded his weapons. One official said at the time, there are many ways that he could have taken care of the mother-in-law without coming with 15 loaded magazines and an assault rifle to a church. I think he came here with a purpose and a mission.
At number 2 now, we have the Texarkana Moonlight Murders. I'm including this in our video about Texas, but this story is famous across America. It even inspired 2 movies. In 1946, Jimmy Hollis and Mary Jean Larry were parked in their car in a secluded area of a park. They were attacked by a stranger wearing a white mask with holes cut out around the eyes and mouth. Hollis was beaten and Larry was molested. They survived, but the next victims unfortunately did not. Richard Griffin and Polly Ann Moore parked their car in a similar spot and were brutally shot in the back of the head, execution style. The same happened to another couple and then another. One of the final victims was Katie Sharks. She narrowly escaped but wasn't able to see the killer because of the blood pouring from her face into her eyes. I have no words. The killer never attacked again, and their identity remains a mystery to this day.
And finally, number 1 now, we have Sean Allen Berry, Lawrence Russell Brewer, and John William King. These were the 3 men who committed one of the most horrific murders that I've ever heard of. On June 7th, 1998, these 3 white supremacists kidnapped James Byrd Jr. in the town of Jasper, Texas. They dragged him at the back of a pickup truck along an asphalt road for 3 miles. James remained conscious throughout most of the ordeal and was killed halfway through the dragging when his right arm and head were severed from his torso. His body was dumped outside of a nearby church. The killers made little to no attempt to hide the killing, and police quickly tracked them down and they were sentenced for the murders. The ringleader, Brewer, was sentenced to death and executed via lethal injection on September 21st, 2011. King remains on death row while appeals are pending. Berry was sentenced to life in prison. The killing actually led to a whole new law being passed by President Obama to protect individuals on the basis of race, sexual orientation, and gender.
While there are many reportedly haunted hotels in Texas, this one seems to top many lists for the most ghostly activity. Most of this seems to stem from the very chilling stories of room 525. In the 1880s, there was a young couple that was having their wedding at the hotel, or at least that was the plan. The groom got cold feet and left the bride at the altar. Now, heartbroken, she ran upstairs to their suite, room 525, and took her own life. And it said she still walks the halls in her long white gown. But that isn't the end of the story, because in 1991, another bride was spurned at the altar, and after going on a shopping spree with the groom's stolen credit card, she too returned to room 525 and took her own life. Since then, guests have seen her carrying a pistol and walking into the room, all without ever opening the door. So don't stay in room 525 or you may never check out. There's also an eerie painting that's said to be inhabited by the spirit of a young girl, the daughter of a senator, whose expression seems to change on its own. People who view the painting have said that they feel like they were floating off of the ground, though they remained on the floor. They also say that their equilibrium and balance was off for a few hours after looking at her. Number 9. Baker Hotel, Mineral Wells. Mineral Wells is known for its, you guessed it, mineral-rich water. In the 1880s, people would travel from all over Texas to drink some, and it supposedly had healing powers and could cure almost any ailment. And with that kind of tourist attraction, you need somewhere for all of these folks to stay. And so, in 1929, the Baker Hotel was opened. With 14 floors and 450 rooms, it was the biggest hotel for miles, and it used the mineral water as a draw for all sorts of people. To this day, workers and visitors alike find small things missing from their pockets or bags while touring the grounds, and workers have later found them on the floor in the Baker Suite, the room where the owner lived and died. They also report the smell of cigar smoke in the air, another habit of Mr. Baker, further proving his presence. But there are also some less friendly spirits here, notably that of the chopped bellhop, who lost his life in a freak elevator accident that saw his top half removed from the bottom half of his body. He's seen floating sans legs and screaming to be made whole again. Workers recommend you stay away, lest you meet the same fate. Coming in at number 8, we have the Marfa Lights in, you guessed it, the town of Marfa. While there is so much beauty in the area and plenty of non-spooky reasons to visit, the main tourist attraction to this quaint little town are floating, sourceless lights that seem to change color and even move in the night sky. Many visitors make the journey at all times of year to see the lights, and there's even a yearly festival made in their honor. Reported since 1883 by people of all ages and professions, no one knows what these floating orbs are. They appear at random, but usually in the same area of the sky, and since there's so much open space and low light pollution, it's perfect for stargazing, or seeing spooky orbs, I guess. Some say that these lights are UFOs, some say spirits, and others think that they're just headlights. All that I know is that if I see a mysterious floating orb, I'm going the other way. Number 7. Woman Hollering Creek, San Antonio. Said to be the home of La Llorona, or the Weeping Woman, This creepy creek leaves anyone who visits with a sense of dread. As the story goes, La Llorona was a woman who was distraught that her once doting, affectionate husband left her for another woman. And after confronting him and leaving the confrontation with cuts and bruises, she waded into the water, dressed in her best clothes, and drowned herself in the creek, right after doing the same to the rest of her family. Her chilling screams for her children can be heard all the way from the highway, giving her and the creek its very apt name. Many people have felt themselves being drawn towards the water by ghostly voices, and some have even been tugged towards the bank of the creek. Perhaps it's La Llorona looking for her next victim. The screams heard and feelings of being pulled into the water have mostly been reported by younger people, making this all the more terrifying given what La Llorona did. Number 6. El Paso High School. Now, when you're thinking of haunted places, a school isn't exactly the first place that comes to mind, but this one has quite a story. In 1985, the graduating class received their yearbooks, and when basking in the nostalgia of their group photo, they noticed something odd. A woman who no one could identify was in the picture with them. Now, obviously, that would be quite concerning. I know I'd be freaked out if there was someone I'd never seen before standing next to me in a picture. The blurry apparition still has not been identified to this day, but some think it's a student who fell from a window years before, who never got to graduate. I say give her the diploma. She's already in the yearbook. Sticking in El Paso, in our number 5 spot is the Plaza Theater Performing Arts Center. As someone who loves the theater, I try to see as many shows as I can, but I think I'll skip visiting this theater, no matter how good the production is. Built in 1930 as a movie house, demolished for a parking lot in the late 80s, and rebuilt as a live theater space, this building has seen many changes, but some things have stayed constant throughout its history. Many workers of the building have reported seeing a man in one of the box seats, in a tuxedo, smoking a cigarette. One crew member recalls seeing him after turning on the stage lights, sitting alone in the box, as though he'd been there for hours already before the lights came on. And when she saw the smoking man, he turned to her and said, "We all have our time to die," and then threw himself headfirst over the balcony, vanishing before he could hit the ground. A former vice president of the theater also recalls seeing a ghostly girl bouncing a ball in the aisles of the theater and always staring. He also noticed that there was a rag doll that seemed to appear and disappear on its own, moving to locations that it couldn't have without someone's help. Even locked doors didn't seem to stop it from appearing in the projection booth. Number 4. Yorktown Memorial Hospital. Established in 1951, this abandoned hospital has been named one of the most haunted places in America. And since over 2,000 patients are said to have died within its walls before it shuttered its doors in 1992, I can see why. Reports of apparitions of people in hospital gowns running through the corridors or hiding in rooms are numerous, along with moving wheelchairs, disembodied voices, and footsteps. But there are some who have even more chilling stories. While exploring the halls and rooms that have remained largely untouched since its closure, some ghost hunters have been touched, had their clothes tugged on, or even pushed to the ground while being given a ghostly warning. Some of the spirits are believed to be that of patients who had illegal medical experiments performed on them and lost their lives in the process, making for a very vengeful ghost. Number 3. The Screaming Bridge in Arlington. On the night of February 4th, 1961, 6 from the local high school were taking a drive after seeing a movie earlier in the evening. While driving down Bedford Road toward the rail crossing bridge, which had mysteriously been burned down a few years previous, only rebuilt earlier that year, they were startled by another car reversing and honking its horn wildly. This caused the driver to speed up out of fear, and not realizing that the bridge was out, the car careened over the edge and crashed into the other side of the ravine. Unfortunately, 3 of them lost their lives that night, and their screams of terror can still be heard by anyone traveling the renamed Greenbelt Road. The saddest part of this story is that the car that startled them was being driven by a man who had just barely avoided going over the edge of the broken bridge himself, and he was reversing and honking to warn them of the danger ahead. The entire area, now known as Death Crossing, is now blocked off and no traffic travels through. At number 2 on our list, we have La Carafe in Houston. This historic bar, built originally as a bakery in 1860, has been serving patrons for decades, but many come not only for the drinks, but for a paranormal experience. Bartenders and visitors alike have seen apparitions of a hulking man walking upstairs and hearing his giant footsteps pacing the floor. No one knows who this may be, but some say he died there from some nefarious means. The former manager of the bar can also be seen staring out of the top floor window, looking over his patrons and ensuring they're having a good time. And he seems a bit more friendly. However, there are some that report the sounds of a body being dragged across the floor above, but when the sound is followed, nothing's there. Makes you wonder what happened upstairs. And since it's one of the oldest buildings in the city that's been in continuous use, it's become a tourist hotspot and a historical site. Personally, I won't be stopping in for a drink anytime soon, no matter how good the cocktails are. And finally, number 1, the Alamo. While students are taught to remember the Alamo, they don't really teach about all of the spirits who can never forget. In the infamous battle, thousands of soldiers lost their lives, and many were dumped into mass graves and others left to rot out in the sun, so it makes sense that you'd have some pissed off ghosts wandering the ground. There have been countless reports of soldier apparitions walking with weapons in hand, taking their usual patrol, and even full platoons screaming and charging into battle. Even in the afterlife they couldn't get away from war, and so they continue to fight their invisible enemy. There are also accounts of a small blonde-haired boy hiding in multiple places where the gift shop now stands, so make sure to pick up your haunted keychains. While the buildings are beautiful to look at and the area is interesting to explore, the history can leave one with a haunting feeling, and with all those spirits around, I'd be careful touring here, especially at night.
Alright, coming in at number 10, we have Lechuza. Ooh, I love a good owl, but this one is not your average mouse catcher. Lechuza is a shape-shifting witch who flies through the night hunting for prey. While in flight, she may look like an owl. When a Lechuza is stopped, they have bird bodies and human faces, so basically a lot like a harpy. The women seem to be hybrid monsters, as in their human lives they were said to have sold their soul to the devil, who gave them intense magical powers in exchange for their souls. How do you know you're in the presence of a Lechuza? Well, they'll let you know by a series of whistling and baby noises. Those who try and investigate what the noises are will likely become dinner for the owly she-witches. Not great.
Next up at number 9 now, we have Andrea Yates. In 2001, she confessed to drowning her own 5 children in their bathtub. She'd been suffering with postpartum depression and postpartum psychosis. She was in and out of psychiatric clinics to help treat her and was given cocktails of medications to help curb her suicidal tendencies. A psychiatrist warned Andrea and her husband Rusty not to have any more children, as it would only worsen her condition. Soon after her release though, she conceived their 5th child. By the following year, she had degenerated into a near catatonic state. She began mutilating herself and reading Bible verses feverishly. On June 20th, 2001, her husband left for work against their doctor's instructions to supervise Andrea around the clock. She then filled the bathtub with water, and one by one she began to drown her young children. The final child tried to run when he saw his sister floating in the bathtub, but he too was caught and killed.
Coming into number 8, we have the Chinese cemetery. There is a strange urban legend surrounding a 7-foot tall ghost and her lover at the Lona China Cemetery in Texas. This isn't just your classic ghost haunting in a graveyard, except actually I guess it is, only there's a freakishly tall ghost. The story goes that a man wanted to run away with his lover of Chinese descent, but he was forbade by his great-grandfather who owned the cemetery. The issue here was an issue of race. The man was Anglo-Hispanic, but his granddie didn't want him mixing. I bet that old racist isn't pleased that the cemetery is now called the Chinese Cemetery. Hey. Anyway, both the ghost of the tall woman and the man are said to roam the cemetery at night looking for one another, but sadly they never quite meet, which is pretty depressing. Apparently the female has been known to reach out and touch you, thinking that you might be the lost love. Sends shivers up my spine. Ooh. Coming in at number 7, we have the legend of Midget Mansion. Not the most politically correct name, but it seems that Midget Mansion is the name this urban legend is best known by in San Antonio. It seems that the house in question is a mansion with low-hanging fixtures and ceilings custom built for a family of small people. A husband and a wife and their normal-sized children took up residence in this home. The father was said to be a respected businessman in the 1920s and was well liked in the community, who found him to be a novel addition. It seems sadly the man went mad one day and murdered his entire family. What with the murders and the odd size of the home, nobody really wanted to buy it, so it fell into disrepair. It seems that the ghostly sounds emanating from the building and strange shadows lurked for many years. A lot of people who went to the abandoned house felt a malicious presence. From my research, it seems that the old house has finally been pulled down in favour of condos. However, the ghostly presence, the trauma of the family left behind, is apparently still rife in folklore. Coming into number 6, we have El Cucuy. Am I saying this right, Texas? Let me know, because I'm just a humble British gal who has no idea really. So these urban legends come around so much, I honestly feel like in every country and within that a lot of provinces and states have their own version. El Cucuy is a Texan bogeyman, but worse apparently. Now the legend describes the beast as male, small, humanoid with glowing red eyes. El Cucuy hides in closets and under beds and comes for naughty children in the night. While this does seem like your classic boogeyman stuff, it seems that there have been some reported sightings of El Cucuy over the years. Now this leads me to think that actually maybe there is something more to this urban legend after all. Coming into number 5, we have the Hitchhiker of White Rock. This legend comes from White Rock Lake in northeast Dallas, where reportedly a 20-year-old girl committed suicide in the lake in the 1930s. Nobody knows why she took her own life, although many suspect it was as a result of heartache. It's always heartache, isn't it? To this day, people report seeing a woman standing by the lake in a wet dress. She stops cars that drive by and ask for a ride. Now, if you refuse her, an accident will likely befall you, but if you say yes, she will vanish in the back of your car, leaving just a puddle. Coming into number 4, we have the South Texas Headless Horseman. During Halloween in San Patricio, you could enjoy a haunted hayride as you hear the ghostly legends of the Headless Horseman. It seems that in the 1800s, a wealthy man from Kentucky came to Texas to make his fortune. He was buying up land and his last stop was the town of San Patricio. Unfortunately for him, his wagon was looted and he lost both his gold and his head to thieves. To this day, his headless body is said to ride the stretch from Matthias to San Patricio. Coming into number 3, we have Demon's Road. It just isn't an urban legend video without a spooky haunted road, is it? No. It's not. In Huntsville, Texas, there is a stretch of road called Bowden Road, although locals will tell you that it's called Demon's Road. Why? Well, because of the demonic things that have reportedly happened along it. Oh, and there's a cemetery at the end of the road, which doesn't really help matters. A whole bunch of Huntsville residents have had weird experiences along the road or seen strange things, but this isn't just your average haunted road. It seems that oftentimes spectres will follow people home. One popular story associated with Demon's Road is that a woman was visiting the cemetery at the end of the road when she saw a man lurking. Now, the man was acting a bit weirdly, he was pacing up and down, but she didn't pay him much attention. After that, as she was journeying home, she thought she saw the same man walking on the road, but once again, she just ignored it. When she got home, however, she thought she saw the same man staring at her from her bathroom mirror while she was in the shower. She screamed, he disappeared, and she never saw him again. Creepy. Coming into number 2, we have the Killer Nurse Ghost. Deep within the halls of Bexar County Hospital, still a fully functioning hospital in San Antonio, Texas, there is said to be a malicious spirit who kills patients at night. I had no idea that ghosts could actually kill, and I'm not happy about this turn of events. The legend goes that the nurse wanders the halls at night and kills patients in their room in consecutive room number order. Patients who were seemingly getting better would simply drop down dead, but before they died, they would report speaking to a particular nurse, although none of the ward staff knew who that was. When CCTV footage was checked, it seems that all the patients who died were seen to be talking to thin air. It is likely that this urban legend is inspired by the real-life killer nurse, Janine Jones, a serial killer nurse at the Bexar County Hospital, who did actually use lethal drug cocktails to murder 60 children. Finally, coming into number 1, we have La Lorna. Part banshee, part horse, La Lorna is a famous female spirit that haunts El Paso. She roams the banks of Rio Grande, causing havoc. It is said that she killed herself and her children down by the river because she was jilted by her ex-lover, who didn't want to marry her because he simply couldn't accept her kids. What a nasty man. Heartbroken and crazed, obviously killing your kids and yourself would be an emotional ordeal, and it seems that that emotion has carried on through into the afterlife. She's now heard wailing by the river. When she has been spotted, she is seen with the head of a horse and the body of a human. What's going on there? Honestly, I don't know. In the area, people are warned from going down to the river late at night, as La Lorna will force you to keep her company, whatever that means. In 2019, New Line Cinema are set to release a Hollywood adaptation of this called The Curse of La Lorna, so that's pretty exciting. A Hollywood movie made out of Texas urban legends. Great!
Been torn up, some ghostly reminders of the past still remain. When you drive down this lonely 8-mile long dirt road at night, you, like thousands of others before you, are sure to see what are known as the ghost lights. Basketball-sized orbs of light that float and dance through the air, even changing in color according to some. There are a few stories on what these lights actually are. The most popular story is that a tragedy occurred on a midnight train run. The conductor, sleep-deprived from a long journey through the state, needed some fresh air to wake himself up. He stuck his head out the window, and in a freak accident, he was decapitated by a tree. And now his spirit is wandering the road, searching for his lost head. The other prevailing theory is that the light is a ghostly lantern belonging to a groom whose bride left him at the altar. He went searching for her in the forest at night, but has still never found her to this day. Number 9. USS Lexington, Corpus Christi. Now before I tell you about this spooky ship, make sure to hit the subscribe button so you can catch all of our amazing videos. As a naval vessel that saw actual battle, there have been multiple lives that were lost on board, including that of an engine room operator who still roams the ship at night waiting for the battle to end. The crew of the ship have often reported flickering lights and doors slamming on their own, which, given that this is a very well-maintained historical site, you'd think that they would have found the cause by now. Maybe it's just the ghosts of sailors lost to time. Known for its programs in engineering, technology, and agriculture, Texas A&M is one of the most highly regarded universities in the state. But the engineering building is home to not only future engineers, but the spirit of a former worker. In 1959, Roy Sims was the foreman for the meat locker in what was then the Animal Industries building. He was showing his assistant some tips on butchering bacon, and when the assistant stepped out to get them both some coffee, the knife slipped and Sims accidentally sliced his leg, severing his femoral artery in the process. The assistant returned to see Roy bleeding out on the floor and called an ambulance, but it was too late, and he passed away. Students and faculty alike report strange happenings in the building to this day. Noises and crashes, cool breezes when all the windows and doors are shut, and even objects moving or being out of place. And many attribute this to the ghost of Roy Sims just trying to get back to work. Number 7. Lake Highlands High School, Dallas. Imagine being back in high school, and during a rehearsal for the school play, the lights suddenly go out, and when they come back on, costumes have moved, props have crashed to the floor, and you see a ghostly apparition rise back up to the rafters. This is exactly what some students and faculty have reported at the Dallas High School. Reportedly, the ghost is that of a former student, Elizabeth, who took her own life jumping from the roof of the auditorium. While many attribute the cold spots and strange noises to the wind, there is no denying that there was a student named Elizabeth who attended the school around the same time the urban legend takes place and passed away, though the cause remains unclear. Number 6 on our list, the Ritz Theater in Corpus Christi. While there are no accounts of specific deaths associated with what was once South Texas's most beautiful theater, there are certainly enough ghostly happenings to make anyone's skin crawl. Paranormal investigators have reported that while walking through the now crumbling building, you can feel cold spots, hear voices, and see orbs floating through the air, some of which they've actually been able to catch on camera. Perhaps these are spirits who never managed to move on, or maybe they're happy right where they are, enjoying a pleasant night out at the theater in the afterlife. We won't know until somebody asks. Number 5. Jefferson Hotel, Jefferson. Originally built in 1851 as a cotton warehouse, the Jefferson Hotel has had haunting stories for decades. To this day, workers who were once skeptical of spirits have been converted to believers after dishes have gone flying, phantom footsteps were heard, and the front switchboard lit up as though the rooms were talking to each other, even when the hotel was closed to guests. Many attribute this to the ghost of Elizabeth, common ghost name I guess, who took her own life in the hotel after her soon-to-be husband sent a note that he would not be coming to the wedding. This has been verified by newspapers to have happened in the 1870s, and there have been sightings of a woman in white roaming the halls of the hotel ever since. Number 4. Hendley Row, Galveston. One of the oldest still operating commercial buildings in the city, Hendley Row has seen many occupants throughout its time. Most notably, it was a watchtower during the American Civil War. Some have reported a soldier on the roof of the building at night watching out for Union Army members. There are also many spirits who appear soaked and wet from the 1900 storm that they and 12,000 others lost their lives in. However, my favorite story from this building is actually more recent. The manager of the market was gifted a photo of of Dr. Wilbur, a man who had lived and died in the buildings many years before, and they decided to hang it in the market as a historical artifact. When Hurricane Ike hit the city in 2008 and left the building in 10 feet of water, damaging so much of the property, the picture remained unharmed, despite falling in the water. During their annual Day of the Dead celebration, the photo is included on the altar, along with many other objects and candles. With a 3-person rotation to ensure it's done, the candles are extinguished at night. Yet every year, the candles are mysteriously already burning the next morning. Number 3. Haunted Train Tracks, San Antonio. On a dark night in 1936, at the rail crossing on Shane Road just outside of San Antonio, a tragedy occurred which would rock the state to its core. An after-hours event at the local elementary school had many students staying late that night, and the school bus service was diverted till later in the evening. When it was time to go, students loaded up and headed home. Unfortunately for some, this would be their last ride. The bus had been working better than ever all evening, the bus driver noted, and suddenly it stalled out on the rail tracks. The driver tried to restart the vehicle, but it was no use. Then suddenly a train appeared. Its lamp must have been out, and it was too late to move the bus, even if it was working. The driver began to carry students off the bus as fast as he could, but then the bus was hit by the train side on, and the driver was thrown from the window. 10 students survived, but many others didn't. After recovering from his injuries and leaving the hospital weeks later, the bus driver got in his car and returned to the rail crossing that night. Haunted by grief, he drove his car onto the tracks, turned it off, and hurled his keys into the night, determined to take his own life. And when he saw the train charging down the tracks, he suddenly felt the car rolling forward, all the way off the tracks and out of harm's way. When he inspected his car, he saw multiple sets of small handprints on the back, perhaps those of the students, not wishing for his life to be lost in the same way theirs had. Number 2. Hotel Galvez, Galveston. After the devastating hurricane in 1900 that left many dead and much of the town destroyed, Galveston decided to rebuild. And with that came the Hotel Galvez. Many spirits are said to be lurking the grounds, even to this day, but the most infamous of them all is Audra. In 1952, she was staying in room 501, while her fiancé was out at sea working on a cargo vessel. When news came from the company that their ship had sunk and all hands on board were lost, Audra decided to end her life in the hotel room that night. But a few days later, her betrothed returned to the hotel. Reports had been wrong and he had survived the shipwreck, and elated to see his fiancée, he threw open the doors to room 501 and saw her body. Distraught, he then took his own life, laying next to her on the bed. And finally, we reach your number 1 most suggested haunted place in Texas, Goatman's Bridge. This bridge in Denton once led to the homestead of a farmer, the Goatman, who was renowned for the quality of his farm's milk, cheeses, and meat. The former owner of the land never saw any such success while he operated the farm, and in a booze-fueled fit of jealousy, he attacked the farmer, put a rope around his neck, and threw him from the side of the bridge. He then returned to the homestead and burned it to the ground, taking the lives of the family and the livestock. When he returned to the bridge to check on his gruesome handiwork, he looked below only to see an empty noose. He then heard 3 loud metal clangs, like someone was knocking on the bridge. And then suddenly behind him, a large, ghostly man with a goat for a head appeared, put a noose around his neck, and threw him over the side of the bridge, taking revenge for himself and his family. Now they say that if you visit the old Alton Bridge at night and knock 3 times, you too will see the Goat Man. But be warned, he does not like to be disturbed. Number 10. White Rock Lake Park, Dallas. In 1943, the story of the ghost of White Rock was published in a Texas folklore publication, Backwoods to Border. The story goes that there was a young couple who was looking for somewhere they could be alone. They drove down a deserted road and parked on the shore of the lake. When they turned their headlights on, they saw someone walking towards them. A woman dressed in a white sheer dress who was soaking wet was coming closer and closer to their car. Concerned, they asked the woman if she was alright, and the woman then spoke and said, "I'm sorry to intrude, and I would not under any other circumstances, but I must find a way home immediately. My boat overturned, the others are safe, but I must get home." The couple agreed to take her home, and she gave them an address not too far away. As they drove off, the driver turned back to ask for some directions, but the backseat was empty and soaking wet. When they arrived at the address the woman in white gave them, a man answered the door, and when he was told what happened, he replied, "You are the 3rd couple who's come to me with this story. 3 weeks ago, while sailing on White Rock Lake, my daughter drowned. Many sightings have been reported since."
Coming in at number 9, we have the Candy Lady. Who loves candy? candy? I love candy. Get me a dip and dab and a strawberry lace. Although we have to say the Candy Lady of Texas is enough to make me give up caramels for life, which is a shame because caramel's such a dream. So the Candy Lady is said to have been a woman called Clara Crane. She lived in Texas around the turn of the 20th century. She was said to have been married to an older man, and the pair had a child called Marcella. Sadly, Marcella was killed in a freak accident, and Clara blamed her husband and then went mad, reportedly killing him with poisoned caramel. She was then taken to North Texas Lunatic Asylum but released a few years later. This is when candy started showing up on windowsills, luring in kids. Later, a number of kids across the state went missing, and one farmer was said to have found rotten children's teeth in a caramel wrapper on his land. The urban legend goes that the Candy Lady will start by leaving a kid candy to win their trust. Then she'll abduct them and stab them with a fork. I shouldn't laugh, but forks are kind of like the comedy side of utensils, right?
Number 8. San Fernando Cathedral, San Antonio. The oldest church in the entire state of Texas has stood tall for nearly 300 years, and in that time it's collected many spirits, some of whom were buried within the walls of the church themselves. When searching for paranormal activity here, one of the first things researchers often see is a white horse trotting in front of the cathedral, only to disappear soon after. It's said that the horse was a gift from an Apache tribe that was refused and killed. Other ghosts that walk the grounds include that of a man dressed in black clothes from the 18th century who follows tours and then suddenly disappears, as well as those of monks who can be seen and heard standing at the back of the pews during services. Number 7. Demon's Road, Huntsville. Formerly known as Bowden Road, this seldom traveled dirt road is creepy enough without the ghost stories. It's overgrown, has misshapen trees, and in the dark seems like something right out of a horror movie. But there is at least one notable spirit who haunts travelers who dare come through here. A boy on a tricycle with glowing eyes has been reported by many people riding down the road. He appears in the middle of the road and stares you down until you approach him, and once you do, a thick fog rises from the ground and he disappears. There's one more story about Demon's Road that I found super interesting though. Two friends heard that the road was haunted and decided to check it out for themselves, and as they drove down it in the middle of the night, the trees seemed to shift and shake, and then they arrived at their destination at the end of Demon's Road, which just so happens to be the next entry on our list. Number 6. Martha Chapel Cemetery. When the two men drove up to the cemetery, which was named after the first person who was buried there, Martha Palmer, moonlight was piercing through the clouds and lighting the headstones and epitaphs before them. They both got out to crack a few brews and explore the cemetery, but when the driver decided to pour some on one of the graves, a skeletal hand burst from the ground, grabbing at his ankle and dragging him into the dirt. His friend and passenger ran over to help, kicking at the zombie-like arm and dragging him away. After he was freed, the driver called out for them to escape, and when he got back to his car, he looked back, but didn't see his friend who supposedly just saved his life. He was actually still sitting in the passenger seat, asleep. And as he peeled out and drove back down Demon's Road, his passenger slumped over into his lap, and the driver realized that his friend had died. Allegedly, he passed away from a heart attack on the drive to the cemetery. And in 2018, a video surfaced from someone who was exploring the Google Street View of the area and saw a ghostly image appear inside the cemetery. A creepy, pale face of a boy was behind a tree in one shot and missing in the next. There was also a large black figure in the background that did not seem to be human. Spooky stuff. Number 5. Miss Molly's Hotel, Fort Worth. Originally built in 1910 as the Palace Rooms, Fort Worth's first bed and breakfast, Miss Molly's, has had quite the history. During Prohibition, it became a speakeasy called the Oasis. In the 1940s, it became a brothel known as the Guyette Hotel, and after that was shut down, it became Miss Molly's. There have been many reports of unwanted guests appearing here, most notably those of Jake the Cowboy and Josie King, the former madam of the brothel, both of whom are seen as full-body apparitions. Workers and visitors alike have witnessed them walking through locked doors, books being thrown, items disappearing and reappearing in random places, and strangely, change being neatly organized in certain rooms. In room 3, indents on the edge of the bed have appeared as though someone were suddenly sitting on it and shaking the bed while guests sleep. You know, I think Little Richard said it best. Good golly, Miss Molly. Number 4. The Grove, Jefferson. This house, built in 1861, has had many owners over the years, and most would agree that the place is cursed. Since its construction, most of the owners of the house have experienced some sort of tragedy. The original owner lost his cotton factory due to a freak flood, and a lynch mob committed horrible atrocities on the properties, where 4 freed slaves were brutalized and hung from trees on the property. The spirits of these men are said to be the most active spirits on the property. Later owners saw multiple family members take their own lives on the property, and some developed rare diseases. The spirits here are quite restless, and there are reports abound of books flying off shelves, mirrors shattering, voices telling people to do horrible things to themselves, and full-on ghostly apparitions that appear and disappear at will. All of these things show that the Grove definitely belongs on this list. Number 3, the Black Swan Inn, San Antonio. There is no relation to the 2010 film here, but the strange happenings have messed up people's minds just as much as Natalie Portman's characters was. The land that the inn now stands on has major ties to indigenous peoples from some 7,000 years ago, and is also a former battle site for the war between the Texan and Mexican army in 1842. But 35 years later, a dairy farm was founded on the land by a German immigrant. The blood-soaked soil here seems to be a bad place to build, as tragedy struck many who lived on the land. The farmer's wife passed away from cancer she developed shortly after moving in, and 2 years later, he decided to join her by taking his own life. Soon after, the property was purchased by 2 families and renamed the White Gables. However, at the age of 38, one of the new owners, Jolene Street, also passed away due to cancer, and like the owners before them, her husband hung himself in the bedroom. The inn that now stands has had reports of the spirits of the former owners wandering the halls with their necks broken, pushing guests off of their beds, and generally getting up to no good. No matter which way you slice it, this property seems cursed. Number 2, the Hill House, Mineral Springs. In part 2, I talked about the haunted Baker Hotel in Mineral Springs, but it seems that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, because just behind the Baker Hotel lies one of the most haunted places in Texas, the Hill House. Many people stay in this house attempting to witness paranormal activity, and most of them get more than they bargained for, and don't make it through the night without leaving terrified. The owners of the house, who purchased it in 2017 knowing its haunted history, rent it out to individuals and paranormal research teams looking to witness something terrifying. And apparently about 50% of them, including the professionals, leave within the first night. This is due to a spirit or entity that resides here named Toby, who growls loudly in your ear to get out, knocks things over, slams doors, and even gets violent. Videos show all sorts of terrible things happening to people who stay here, like a woman who was taunting the spirits, trying to make something happen, being viciously pulled off of her bed, leaving her bruised. And when she returned a year later, for some reason, she was scratched by something invisible in the room so badly that blood leaked through her shirt. Whoever Toby is, it seems like he doesn't want anyone else to come into his house and will do anything to keep them out. Number 1, Old Town Spring. While the rest of the entries on this list and my other 2 videos have had some terrifying places, our number 1 spot belongs to an entire town that is haunted, and some even say cursed. Allegedly, in the 1700s, a curse was cast by members of the Akokisa tribe on the town and its people who stole their land and killed their kin. And this curse has followed the town all the way through history, continuing even today. Every building in this small town has a haunting story, and I'll share a few of them with you now, but I encourage you to look this up because there are so many more that I just can't get to today. The Whitehall House was built in 1895 and has since been converted into a funeral home, and they have a special room upstairs designated as the Ghost Room, where the spirits of the dead who haunt the building can reside. Figures are seen walking through the door, dancing on the balcony, and heard inside. One of the previous owners decided to renovate the room and experienced, quote, violent spirit activity, and it took years for the ghosts to calm back down. There are now 2 new clauses in the lease agreement for the building. The Ghost Room is not to be disturbed, and you can't break the lease due to a haunting. Many of the buildings in town can be seen with trees growing closely and even through some of the buildings, and allegedly the curse placed upon the town ensured that if anyone cut down any trees, they would experience a terrible fire. And this has happened inexplicably many times to many different buildings in the town, and some quite recent. There is also a hanging tree where a judge sentenced more than 60 people to death, which is an insane rate even by the standards of any time. And the old ice house, which was used to store corpses waiting to be sent to the funeral home, has a heavy energy, and everything goes quiet when you get near it. And it's burned down countless times. You know, with all of these creepy things going on throughout the years, it is no wonder people think Old Town Spring is cursed, and a no-brainer that it ended up number 1 on this list, and it might even be above the number 1s in part 1 and 2. Let me know what you think in the comments below.